Okay, so we are recording to the cloud live on YouTube. We don't yet have a quorum, so we'll hold off on any acceptance of any meeting minutes. It's 4:06, and we're just going to proceed as a meeting. And with that, I will turn it over to Francisco. I think you should be able to share your screen. There you go.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right, I take it you can all see my screen, is that correct?
Yeah, nothing on it.
There's nothing on. Yeah.
It's coming. It should be coming.
The tubes have to warm up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hit it. Give it a whack.
Yeah. Nothing yet.
Not yet?
No.
Nobody gets there. You have like over 50 to get that.
Oh, I wasn't even paying attention. Sorry. It's been one of those days.
Okay, I will reshare. Can you all hear me at least?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could try to
Okay, yeah.
find it.
Things are freezing up on me, so I'm going to try to back out of this and reshare. Not sure.
Let me see if I could bring it up in a tab. I have to find it, and then I can just do it.
Yeah, everything is frozen on me.
Okay, just give me 1 second.
Okay.
I'll take it from the one that you. Yeah.
Yeah, I might have to leave the meeting, come back in and get things working because.
Okay, did he do that? No, I'm trying to find it on my email.
Sharon, I can try to find it if it's easier to share mine as opposed to as a host.
11, I have one from, but this morning, 11:21. Well, that would be the same. It wouldn't matter, right, Francisco? Because you
Yeah,
do
it's
it.
the same. That'll bring it to the current.
Okay, hold on. Let me see if I can get it into Slack. No. Let me go back to here, go back to the meeting. Stop sharing. I'm going to stop participant sharing, and then I'm going to see if I can share my screen.
All right, I'm finally unfroze. So let me try to share one more time.
Okay, hold on.
And then if that doesn't work, we'll just have you present, and then I'll just ask you to advance the slide.
Yep.
Okay, so let's try this again.
Okie dokie. There you go. You got it.
Okay, and I'm going to leave it in working mode. That way I can type some notes right into the presentation as we talk about things like I did at the last meeting. All right, so thank you, everyone. Thanks for being patient with some of the technical stuff here. Our agenda is similar to last month's meeting. It's very straightforward, but that being said, we have a lot to discuss. First, we will, I hope, very quickly review the land use and environmental resource and economic development recommendations. As a reminder, we discussed these at length at last month's meeting, and from the direction that you gave us, we finalized our recommendations, and so we wanted to put those in front of you today. Just so that you're aware of where we're going with these. And then more importantly, we want to have a conversation around our final two topic areas, that being city services and facilities and cultural resources, and our recommendations for those. All right, so where we are in this process, by discussing both services and facilities and cultural resources, we have fully covered all the topic areas of the plan. And our next steps, and we'll talk about next steps at the end of the presentation, but we're going to start to really put all of this together into the plan itself. And next time we come back to you, you're going to start to see how it all fits together. Okay, going back to our discussion last month on land use and environmental resources, this is our goal. And as a reminder, we have one big goal per topic area. And for land use and environmental resources, here it is. It's to direct growth and development to areas of the city that have the infrastructure and services to accommodate that growth while protecting the city's environmental resources and ensuring that future growth does not adversely impact those resources. In support of that, and I'm not going to read all of these, I'll just read the strategies we have. We've identified a number of strategies. We discussed almost all of these with you last month, have adjusted the wording, have added to the list, but these should all look pretty familiar to you. The first strategy in support of the goal, and as a reminder, the strategies are how we plan on achieving that goal and working towards the goal, with the actions being the specific steps, incremental steps that we take as part of that strategy. And the first strategy is to ensure that city zoning regulations direct development towards areas that can support development without adversely impacting the city's environmental resources. So is to make sure the zoning regulations adequately protect the city's environmental resources. And if anyone has any questions as we go, feel free to speak up. Let's talk about it, make sure we're all on the same page. Anything that is glaringly missing from your perspective, please let us know. This is going to be a work in progress over the next few months, so that we can adjust as needed. All right. The second strategy in support of our land use and environmental resource goal is to develop an open space and conservation plan with the aims of ensuring the protection and effective management of city-owned open space and identifying open space that may be targeted for acquisition. And a number of actions in support of that strategy. The third strategy is to adopt and implement low impact policies and practices. And that can be done within the zoning regulations and really across the city's practices and its maintenance of facilities as well. Strategy 4 is to continue the protection of environmentally sensitive areas. And we have a number of supporting actions for that that involve zoning regulations, floodplain regulations, aquifer protection regs, etc. Strategy 5 is to work towards protecting and improving water quality of the Still River and other waterways in the city. Still River has a watershed plan with a lot of recommendations that, if realized, would benefit the river and its water quality. So we're providing support here for implementing some of those recommendations, along with some other policies, practices, and zoning support for protection of the city's waterways.
Francisco, it's that HVA's plan? Was that HVA's plan for the Still River?
Yeah,
Okay.
correct.
I'm just
Right, it's a few years old now. It's a fairly robust plan.
Yeah.
Right.
Paul and Bridget, you might have recalled that from last night's discussion.
We do indeed.
All right, strategy 6 is to improve stewardship of forest and tree canopy on city-owned open space and rights of ways. And got a number of ideas on this. We know it's really challenging. It's a lot of property, a lot of trees. and the city has limited forestry resources. But regardless, we see some opportunities to be more proactive in the stewardship of the city's trees and forests. All right, strategy 7 is to continue to promote sustainable stormwater management and floodplain management to be resilient and adaptable to a changing climate. And so this ties right into the discussion we're having on the onset of this meeting, or prior to our meeting starting, about flooding issues across the city and the need to manage stormwater in compliance with MS4 permit and the more severe storm events we're experiencing. One of the big ideas as part of this strategy would be to participate in the FEMA community rating system. It's a pretty heavy lift for any community to participate in that program. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to apply to, submit to, and report to the program. But what that program allows for is it can lower flood insurance costs for property owners. So it's something that needs to be considered, or should be considered.
Yeah, I'll just chime in and say that internally we've had some meetings with Matt Casavecchia, Jen, who's our floodplain coordinator, myself, and the state regarding the program, more details on the program. But yeah, it's a heavy lift for staff, for existing staff. So we'll continue to look at it and see if it's something in the future we can work towards.
And our final strategy under this goal is to improve the management and oversight of the city's land use and environmental resources. I think, as you're all aware, the city has multiple boards and commissions, and the city would likely benefit from consolidating some of those boards and commissions to better staff them, to reactivate some of the functions of boards and commissions that have not met for a few years. So this I think could be a really good strategy for the city to re-energize participation in boards and commissions. All right, and that rounds out our land use and environmental resource strategies. Does anyone have any comments or questions before we review the economic development goal and strategies?
I would just reiterate, Francisco, that once the document gets drafted and we take a look at everything in its entirety, there might be something that, now we've seen the big picture, the assessment of where we are and where we want to be, and we might realize, oh, we forgot something. So
yeah,
there's always room for that.
Yeah, I mean, I have to apologize for the fact that we're almost in a vacuum here. We're so focused, we're kind of losing the big picture in some ways, but we really want to work through all of these details with your support and input, and we want to make sure we put it all in front of you. And it likely, this will all make sense, and you may have a slightly different perspective on some of these recommendations when you see everything packaged together. So we realize we owe you that, and we're going to we certainly will allow for that. You're going to get a chance to see all of this consolidated into a plan, to understand how all these pieces fit together, and to provide us some additional comment and direction once you have the opportunity to see everything put together. All right, on the economic development side of things, our goal is to leverage Danbury's unique assets to support economic development that provides opportunities for all of Danbury's residents. And once again, we have several strategies in support of that. Strategy 1 is to foster an environment that is supportive of economic development and provides opportunities for growth and development of businesses in the city. And we've identified a number of actions the city could take as part of that strategy. And I do want to say this about the actions that we identify. This list could easily be twice the size, and the list, once the city gets started on some of these initiatives, will likely grow as you go through a process of understanding where the opportunities truly are, where the needs are, as some of these strategies and actions are advanced. That list will grow, but here we are trying to seed it with the next steps. What direction should the city move, and where should we be looking, on understanding that this is going to be an evolving process over the next several years, next decade. All right, our next strategy, strategy 2, is to consider funding economic development strategic plan for the city to help define economic development priorities, target industries, workforce development strategies, and assess organizational capacity to undertake economic development programs and initiatives. And the first action of that would be really to assign a committee to guide the plan's development and consider reactivating the Economic Development Commission, potentially as that committee, or subsequently to guide the plan's implementation. There's a lot of value in focusing specifically on economic development with a strategic plan. It really affords an opportunity to go into far more depth than we can go into in the POCD. And these plans, many communities and cities take on these efforts, not on a regular basis, but from time to time when they need to really re-energize economic development within the community. And the timing might be right over the next few years for Danbury as well to take on this effort. Strategy 3 is to consider extending the downtown central business district north and south as recommended by the TOD plan to allow for new higher intensity growth while protecting downtown's historic buildings. And we've talked about this at length from a number of perspectives, from housing, economic development, the downtown, the vibrancy of downtown. So I think this should be very familiar to you. And Sharon and I are working towards doing some urban design studies of the downtown to see what this could look like as part of our efforts. So we hope to be able to report back to you on that at the next meeting or two. Strategy 4 is to continue to invest in downtown Danbury through infrastructure and streetscape improvements, building facade improvements, public spaces, and really marketing the downtown to attract people. And so we have a number of recommendations for that as well. And many of these build upon a TOD plan too. Strategy 5 is to develop a campaign and communications that promote Danbury as a place of innovation and activity. We've had many conversations about all that happens in Danbury, yet there seems to be a lack of awareness, and that's what we're trying to respond to here. Strategy 6 is to review and update as appropriate the city's commercial zone regulations to ensure that the regulations provide sufficient flexibility to allow development that responds to current and future market conditions. We know the market's constantly changing, the retail market's changing, the commercial market, the office market, and it's important to ensure that the zoning regulations are in step with the changing market conditions. Strategy 7 is to consider conducting corridor studies or area plans for corridors within the CG20 and CA80 districts to help align economic development priorities with needed infrastructure improvements along those districts. And those districts mostly are are stretched along some primary corridors in commercial corridors in the city, like Newtown Road and others. And the real value there is to take a closer look at those corridors, at the zoning for those corridors, and really similar to our efforts for the downtown and in updating zoning regulations for the downtown, trying to understand what is needed to accommodate the future of both transportation, infrastructure, and economic development along these corridors. Strategy 8 is to strengthen Danbury's marketing to outside businesses and investors, highlighting the city's economic strengths, which include growing, diversifying population, manufacturing, healthcare, colleges and universities, its workforce, transportation, regional connectivity. And we see a role for the Greater Danbury Chamber of Commerce to play as a partner in that effort. All right, 3 more strategies. Strategy 9 is to partner with institutions such as Western Connecticut, Naugatuck Valley Community College, Danbury Chamber of Commerce, and other major employers to encourage workforce development, training, employee pipelines, and potential for innovation or entrepreneurial activity. We know there's a lot of excitement around the idea of more partnerships, and there's work being done in this area already. Chamber of Commerce does job fairs, and we just see more and more opportunity here, and we think the city should remain focused on a proactive partner in this type of initiative. Strategy 10 is to explore ways to increase employment and entrepreneurship opportunities for disadvantaged groups in Danbury. And that really means more outreach to local communities, to other language speakers, and through the use of existing programs that do engagement of those communities, including improving supply chain and sourcing from small and local disadvantaged businesses. And finally, strategy 11 is to implement the recommendations of the city's affordable housing plan, because employers that want to have employees, those employees need jobs, obviously. And Danbury, if it has affordable housing and availability of housing, it can be or would be all that more attractive to employers considering locating or relocating to Danbury. No action items here because all of that work is in the affordable housing plan. So we're just going to point to that plan. All right, so that covers, those were all of the ideas we talked about last month. We shaped it up some, and this is in this type of language is how we plan on presenting it within the plan. So I'm going to take a pause here. Does anyone have any comments, any questions, any direction that you would like to give us before we move on to our discussion about city services and facilities, which is still at a very draft stage, and we really want your feedback and input on those ideas.
I do, Francesca. This is Richard.
Yeah, go ahead, Richard. Yep.
I'm happy to hear it in strategy number 9 that you're investing with the colleges. But can you go back to, I think it's strategy 2 or 3.
Yep.
I'm not sure which one it was.
Okay.
Where I thought to bridge it, let's see, define economic. Right, it's somewhere in here. Would it be appropriate also to mention to create a strategy with the educational institutions in Danbury, not so much in K through 12, but that be included, but again, to tie in the West Pond and the Naugatuck Valley.
Let's go to that. I have some language to that effect. Let me find it. And here we are. And then you let me know how we can, whether or not we've adequately covered it here, or if there's more that we need to be doing.
And I was just saying, maybe a snippet of just a sentence in that second one, where we're not only talking about business, but we're talking about the investment with the educational communities in Danbury, so that we're bridging both together. Over here, you speak of it more specifically, and the other one was more broad, if you know what I mean.
Okay, yeah. So let me
My
go
thought
back.
process is with the development of, like in Westcon, if they specialize in particular in nursing or in teaching, it may bring, more industry in here in the medical industry relative to the nursing, and hopefully, large candidates on teaching. But I thought maybe in here, if there's a way to bridge or just to note the educational community in here,
Okay.
somehow can you word it general like that? It will cover that. We're not excluding them.
All right, so you would like more of a focus or some focus on targeting or supporting the growth of institutions such as educational institutions, healthcare institutions, that sort of recommendation.
Exactly, to work with, to work with and support, if you want to do that.
Okay, all right.
The educational communities or the educational programs, however it best fits. Just that we're tying in both business and education. I always think that's important to have that synergism together.
And so the educational community, and what about other large institutions such as healthcare providers or other industries?
I think that would be part of the industries and targeted industries, that would fall in that without, and by putting that in there, you start to be more specific.
Okay. All right, we'll figure out how to fit that in and reference the need to support them and build their presence in the economic.
As I said, I think over here it bridges it together, and then in number 9, you're more specific on the university aspect of it.
Okay. Yep. Got it.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, so here's where the real work is to be done, because this is our first cut on some of these ideas, and we really do want your feedback and direction so that we get it right. So let's start with city services and facilities. This is our draft goal statement, and you let us know whether you feel this covers it. And that is to provide high quality and sustainable services and facilities that meet the needs of Danbury's residents and are sufficiently robust to accommodate the needs of a growing city. I hear no objections. Does anyone think we got it right, though?
I think so.
I think so too.
Yeah, and I think you hit that.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And as a reminder, how we got to where we're at, right? We're not pulling these ideas out of the ether. It's in response to our existing conditions findings, the discussion we had with you back in March on this topic, our focus group meeting on this topic, interviews we've conducted with key stakeholders, feedback we've received from through the online survey and the workshops, both in person and virtual, and based upon the experience of our consultant team and our city team as well. So we brought that all together into some ideas and recommendations that we think give the city direction it needs in this area. And and our ultimate, our the final step in this process to put it in front of you and get your feedback on it. So here we are. The first strategy idea is to prepare a city facilities master plan. And this is, we keep pointing to these other plans that need to be done, but that's the reality of the situation. We can only go so far and in so much depth with the POCD process. We think it would be valuable for the city to do a city facilities master plan. And what those master plans typically entail are fairly thorough audits of all of the buildings, conditions assessments, tally up all the square footage, how it's used, survey departments on their staffing, their space needs, their future anticipated space needs. And that can be a really valuable process that in the end, while it costs some money to go through a process like that, in the end, as you might imagine, it could potentially save millions by building exactly what you need, not more than what you need, and investing strategically. So we think that's a good place to start. An important emphasis of that work, I would think, would be energy efficiency, sustainability, and improving and building facilities that are much more efficient than the ones you have now in their current operating conditions. That an environmentally responsible thing to do and a fiscally responsible thing to do.
Yeah, let me just add that this, like other sections of the plan, Antonio, Sean Hanley, Tim will take a look at in terms of buildings. He might have some parts of this and some components of it already done. Yeah, we just don't know. So this is kind of the first, as Francisco said, our first attempt at putting this together and coming up with these ideas based on everything. And then, we would get that input and feedback from department heads and superintendents.
The first thing that jumps out at me is identify heating and cooling improvements needed to identify improvements and systems that could be most energy efficient. Heating and cooling, it may be one of the larger systems to be identified for energy efficiency, but there are so many other aspects of building and new building codes or new building improvements. Just changing the roofs from black to white improves energy efficiency. Solar, proper balances of your heating and cooling. There's a lot more than specifically heating and cooling. So maybe we could broaden that a little bit.
Okay. Yep. Got it.
I'd like to just say something, Helen.
Yep.
This is the first one of, I guess, many strategies, so it may be premature for me to bring this up, but one of the things that strikes me about this is assess capacity to meet current and anticipated program needs, and that it's, correlated, maybe highly correlated to organizational structures and also the program structures, and they can be changed. I mean, we don't have to start with what we're doing right now, but potentially, like, we're all attending a Zoom meeting right here, so we don't need an in-person place to go to meet, right? There's a lot of work that could be done to virtualize or automate through technology, ways to get things done that maybe we're not doing right now. It's more in person. So I don't know whether that kind of thing gets addressed, but I would think we'd need to have some of those plans in mind, any changes that we're going to make ourselves more efficient from an organizational standpoint. and a process standpoint
Okay.
before we go add up square footage and whatever. So I guess I'm just saying it's sort of a moving target.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you.
Also, Francesco, do we want to make any comments about utilization of clean energy where possible, so that at least we have that wording in here?
We do. We're going to get into a little bit more of that.
Okay,
And absolutely. And if we need to strengthen the language to that effect, we will.
and one other thought, on your very first slide where I think this was the mission or the definition,
Right.
there was a wording in substantial, if you can go back to the first slide, right, provide high quality and substantial services.
Sustainable.
Sustainable, sorry, I
Yeah.
read it wrong, I thought he was saying substantial, my mistake. Go ahead. I apologize, go ahead, thank you.
No problem. No problem. All right, ready? Next strategy. And these strategies aren't in any particular order. The next strategy is to expand the capacity of Danbury schools to meet student enrollment needs. We know there's a lot of active work being done to address exactly this. But there is work that remains to be done. So first is to continue the work towards developing the Danbury Career Academy. And as I understand it, there's a new site that's been identified for that. Is that correct? And that's definitely the site now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Expand the capacity of existing schools with priority given to the city's most highly utilized schools as identified by the Board of Ed. And finally, to improve school facilities to ensure high quality, modern, and fully accessible facilities are available to Danbury students. How are we doing with that?
Yeah, good.
I like it.
It's an incredibly important issue to the city. To some degree, the city's already moving in that direction, but we certainly want to reinforce that movement with the plan.
Yeah.
Okay. Next strategy is to continue to preserve, enhance, and maintain parks and recreational facilities. And that includes expanding the capacity of park and athletic fields by providing lighting to extend usable hours, exploring opportunities for additional recreational facilities throughout the city with specific attention to the West End, where there's been a lot of population growth and over the past decade or so without a comparable growth in recreational facilities, at least not active ones. Increase funding for playscape replacement and refurbishment. And I know in speaking with staff at DPW that they would love to do more if they had more resources. There is a need in that area. And to expand and enhance trails with the aim of connecting the city's parks and open spaces with a network of trails.
Well, again, the first thing that jumps out of me is we're focusing on playscape replacement and refurbishment, but the money to constantly better the field conditions and bring them to the highest possible levels throughout the city is something that costs money, and I don't want it to be limited to just playscape and.
Okay. So the athletic fields too, they're
Sure,
equally
now
deserving
yeah.
of reinvestment.
Yeah, artificial turfs or real grass. I mean,
And
they're
all
right.
the
It's a cycle.
courts.
And the
all the
courts,
courts.
right,
Sports.
yeah.
All of them require maintenance and or
Okay.
replacement at some point in time.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Next strategy is to expand the capacity and services offered through Danbury's library. At the library, a couple of years ago, conducted a strategic plan that identified areas of need and areas where they would like to improve and expand services offered and facilities. We certainly want to support them in that effort. And from my conversations with the library, I also understand they're very interested in exploring the idea or potentially having a branch library in an area, you know, outside of the downtown to make it more convenient to other users across the city. And it may be that facility could be co-located within an existing building along with another city use. But the idea here is being a branch library.
I have a quick comment. Could we add like a piece that says like considering creating one comprehensive library system? We have the fabulous Danbury Library, and we also have another library on the way to Reading. These libraries don't work contiguously. So creating one comprehensive library system that supports all existing libraries might help us create a branch library sooner rather than later because one already exists. So, you know, there's a conversation about that that's probably should be a little bit larger with the folks from Danbury Library, but we do have Long Ridge and it is wonderful. And if you're talking about adding other branches, it would seem to me that you want to do some comprehensive strategy that includes all the libraries within the city.
Even though they're private libraries, correct?
Well, one is private, but they also receive funding from the city of Danbury. So, right. You know, their only funding source is the city of Danbury and whatever donations they're lucky enough to pick up throughout the year. So having a larger conversation about making them part of the comprehensive library system in a way that doesn't have them getting budgeted monies from a smaller portion of the city budget might go a long way to creating a feasible branch library system, since we already have the foundational aspects of it.
Okay, we'll explore some ideas around that. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Next strategy is to improve resources of the city's Health and Human Services Department to ensure that Danbury continues to meet the needs of residents. And that it starts with they, as I understand it, desperately need more space for their operations. They also struggle to recruit and retain and would benefit from more competitive salaries. There are currently ARPA funds that could likely be directed to Health and Human Services to meet those needs. Of course, those need to somehow be procured and directed towards that department. There's a need to better coordinate regulatory requirements, land use commission functions, and related staff. And to that effect, we should consider moving environmental compliance for wetlands and erosion control out of Health and Human Services and into the Department of Planning and Zoning.
And let me just say before we move on, anybody, I mean, this has been a conversation. Kara knows this wouldn't be coming from left field. So there has been some discussion. They've been in kind of a state of flux with staffing at this point. And the Department of Planning and Zoning provides administrative support to the Environmental Impact Commission, but not technical staff. The technical staff is a person in the health department. So, you know, there has been some discussions again with Carrie over the course of years about whether that's like a land use, you know, the land use person and the commission person may better sit over here rather than in health department. But I think it's a discussion worth having, and so it isn't.
It came up last night. I mean,
yeah,
there are instances where clearly they should be on your side, and I'm sure, because I don't deal with the other side, there's instances where they need to be over there.
Right, right.
But
There's
from
some,
right,
yeah.
from my point of view, either you guys share or we hire a, your own staff for that. But
Yeah.
we got to have one.
Yeah.
We can't keep doing what we're doing and not have one. I mean, an example of that came up last night, actually, about some noncompliance, and we see this all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. And along those lines would be to assign a dedicated staff person and provide resources necessary to continue to provide relocation assistance to tenants. That is required by Connecticut's Uniform Relocation Assistance Act. And when we talked about doing a better job of enforcing housing code, of addressing overcrowding issues, blight issues, it implies that potentially people will need to move out of that housing and find new housing. And so the more enforcement there is on that end, the greater the need for relocation assistance, and the more work that needs to be done by the department. They're meeting the needs of it now, but they would benefit from additional resources. And finally, just to provide more multilingual communications, because increasingly Danbury's a more diverse city, and a lot of the constituents of this department are speaking Spanish or Portuguese.
I have to say they do probably one of the best jobs on their website and in their handouts in multi languages. So
good. Any other questions or comments? All right, let's talk about public safety. And this one is still in the works. We're still trying to follow up with police department and fire department as well, just to make sure that their needs are adequately represented in the plan. But this is where we're at right now. And that is to ensure that Danbury's public safety services have the resources to meet the needs of the community, right? It's pretty basic strategy. And what does that look like? Well, the fire department headquarters has needs. They have current needs as we understand it, potential future needs for more space. There are buildings located in floodplain, so there are some needs there. There's the potential need for a new fire station on the west side of the city. There's a tremendous amount of development out there the past couple of decades, summits, surrounding developments. My conversations with the fire department, they feel they would benefit from a stronger presence in proximity of all that development. The fire department's also expressed a need for equipment to do a better job, or additional equipment to respond to severe weather events like flooding and forest fires. And we also talked about the need to continue plans for the consolidation of volunteer firehouses as a means of reducing costs, increasing efficiency, and addressing declining volunteer levels. And finally, related, Danbury Police Department, we're a little further behind on this, and I'll be connecting with them later this week. But it's really to continue their investments in their vehicle replacement program, body camera project, and other equipment. And we'll figure out what else they need and try to provide the support for them here as well.
I'm going to have to argue that the Danbury Public Works Department is also a public safety service provider, and our needs have to continue to be met as well.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about that.
I'll second that, Tim.
Okay, well, let's
you're absolutely right. You're
As
right.
an insurance agent who lived through the microburst, I can also second that.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's talk about that, Tim. Anything specifically that you'd like to put, other than just, mentioning DPW has needs in order to be an effective part of this public safety team.
Well, are you looking
Anything
for the
specific?
reasons we are a public safety team or?
No,
just
the
our
needs, the specific needs. Yeah.
Well, we have an aging infrastructure that supports public works. I'm sitting in an 80-year-old plus garage that was converted into my office, and I'm swatting gnats as we speak.
You look comfortable.
But yes, and the constant need to repair and replace and update equipment that services the city.
Okay.
You know, and the services include roads, but also the things we don't see in terms of water and sewer that are underground and have specific equipment and employee requirements that have to be kept up with.
Right. Okay. Yeah, we're going to get into water or sewer, but it may be that it's worth you and I having a call offline to talk about other needs just regarding your maintenance operations, roads, and everything else that you do to make sure that we're not leaving you out of the mix here. Okay. All right. Let's move on to the airport. Our strategy is to maintain Danbury's airport in a state of good condition and make investments necessary to meet the needs of the local aviation community and support the airport's role as an economic driver. And from my conversations with the airport, one of their primary concerns is protecting runway approaches from development that would encroach upon that and compromise their compliance with FAA regulations. So that's incredibly important. They have runway and taxiway maintenance needs that are, you can imagine, it's a lot of pavement and very costly. And there's an ongoing need to stay on top of the maintenance of that pavement, resurfacing and replacement that they are not, fully funded for. They would like to construct additional hangars to meet demand. They get demand and requests for hangar space all the time, and it's a revenue generator for them. And then finally, to ensure that the zoning and land use surrounding the airport is supportive and complementary to airport operations.
Well, I mean, one of the big things at the moment is the FAA blocking some maintenance, and we really can't proceed without their underwriting. So maybe there should be something in there about FAA liaison or something, because at the moment, I don't want to get into a lot of detail in this meeting because it's sort of outside the scope of this meeting, but right now, today, we're in a particularly tough spot vis-a-vis the FAA denying us an application, which could be problematic, at the least. It seems to me that the city can manage the airport pretty well, but we've got to maintain our partnership with the FAA. That at the moment, in the last couple of years, I think that's the most important issue. The FAA says you got to take care of the trees. They give us $1 million to take care of the trees. You got to do this. They give us $500,000 to do that. But now they're saying you've got to do this. It's going to cost $2 million, and you've got to pay for it yourself. And we don't have the money to do that. So that's a big issue at the moment. So maybe you could talk to Safranik and
yeah,
I'll
reach back out to Mike. I did have an brief exchange with him this week. He's been really good about filling me in on things. I wasn't aware of anything surrounding this, but I'll reconnect with him.
I can forward you a 20-page. I'm sure you're looking forward to reading it. Document that sort of outlines some of these things.
Okay. Yeah. Feel free to send it my way. I'm used to making my way through those types of documents, so no problem. All right, well, let's move on to renewable energy and energy efficiency. And that is to support sustainability, including energy efficiency and renewable energy sources across all city facilities. And that would start with developing a municipal energy plan that includes energy tracking and management, energy reduction goals and actions, and clean energy goals and actions. As part of that plan, or in addition to that plan, to benchmark and track energy use across city and school buildings and facilities. And I'm sure there's some of this being done already, but it's a good idea to do this universally and to track it. To also include energy efficiency and renewable energy projects in the city's capital plan and ensure that those projects are funded. To implement energy efficiency and renewable energy improvements at cities and school buildings and facilities. And finally, to consider joining the Sustainable Connecticut program as a member community. And if you're not familiar with that program, it has, I would say, about a quarter of Connecticut cities and towns are members. And basically, they have a long list of things that you could do to get credit for. And while there's a little bit of work to fill out the application, submit what you've done, it really helps keep its member communities focused on the goals of sustainability, which includes really making progress towards becoming more energy independent, reducing waste, being more efficient in operations, and being a healthier community as a whole. All right, any questions or comments on this item? All right. Next is to continue to protect and maintain the city's drinking water supply and distribution infrastructure. And that means really, and most critical here is protecting the safe yield. And what that means is the water that you need on a daily basis, plus some, as mandated by the state, to ensure that you do not have a water shortage. And that involves, in order to protect that safe yield, it involves upgrading the Kenosha well fields and providing treatment at those well fields, because those well fields are part of that safe yield resource to be able to draw groundwater to add to your supply when in need. And there are upgrades that are needed there, as I understand it. Next would be to conduct an inventory of lead water service lines and develop a plan for the replacement or treatment of those lines. Implementing water saving measures across city properties and facilities as a means of reducing drinking water usage. And promoting the adoption of best management practices for the use of green infrastructure and stormwater management design. Basically capturing rainwater for use in irrigation instead of using drinking water for irrigation.
Francisco, anywhere in the plan, have we addressed storm drainage as it impacts this page, basically? Have we put that anywhere else where it overlaps?
Yeah, there absolutely. And I think what we might do in the actual document is reference that, because we've put it in the land use and environmental resource section, where we talk quite a bit about stormwater in that section, with specific strategies and recommendations for stormwater which I covered a few minutes ago. That could also probably be located in this section because we're talking about infrastructure, yet there's a direct impact or implications for both the land use contributing to that and to the environmental resources that that stormwater infrastructure is releasing water into. So it may be that we do a better job of stitching these two together and connecting it back. But and basically that is to really fully support, what the stormwater management plan, the improvements necessary to reduce directly connected impervious areas, everything related to that plan.
Francisco, and Tim, feel free to jump in. I'm not really aware of any lead-based systems on the city side, but obviously all of the private homes built before 1978 have them, before 1987. And all of the solder in all of those homes built before 1987 have lead. If the suggestion is the city somehow, underwrite the cost of replacing those privately owned internal non-city service lines, you're probably looking at $5,000 a unit. What are there, 30,000 units in Danbury or something? What do we look at? A $3 billion, my math is 300 million, 3 billion. Whatever it is, it's a phenomenal investment. We saw this obviously in Detroit and Flint and places like that.
Right.
I don't really know what the city would be able to do outside of maybe addressing it for city-owned properties like the housing authority, beyond petitioning Hartford and Washington for public funds to take care of that. I'm not really sure what the city could do about this, unless there are actually, and that's why I said, Tim, jump in, a city service lines made out of lead. I don't believe we have them, but it's possible, I guess.
No, Paul, you're correct. The only place we've ever seen them are the what we call the pig joints or lead joints coming off of the service side of the mains and looping into the services. And the city has a practice of anytime we see them, regardless, we remove them and replace them with current copper. But that's the only place we've ever seen them in our system. So it's always on the service side.
That's insignificant. And plus we're treating the water with an anti-lead thing anyway. So it really is private homes. And that's obviously a big problem, along with lead paint and lead crystal that people are still eating off of and drinking out, but most of that, if not all of it, with the exception of some of the older schools, Park Avenue probably has them, a couple of places like that, that we rectify when we do ongoing renovations. But yeah, it really is on the private side. Big problem, granted, but I'm not sure it's within the scope of the city to deal with that.
This recommendation came out of the Western Connecticut Public Water Service report, which was a few years ago. The state did a series of 3 or 4 studies for the state of all the water systems in certain geographies, in your case, Western Connecticut. It identified the potential for better coordination of those systems, interconnections of the systems, and it also identified specific needs and made recommendations to specific communities. So this came directly out of that. It may be that this was a boilerplate type recommendation. It's not necessarily applicable to Danbury, even though it was recommended through that report. So I think what I'd probably want to do is put it in front of David Day and have him weigh in on with his thoughts on this.
Yeah, listen, it's a good idea. Again, it just comes down to funding.
Okay.
Yeah, let's double check with Dave, because he did have some capital programming requests related to exactly this that I thought, I'm actually pulled it back up.
We
But,
want
yeah, we could do it offline. Yeah, and firm it up for next time, but.
I
let's
mean, in
still-
the least, we may want to communicate to those homeowners that have the potential to have the lead, so they understand that the potential is, that they have the potential and that it's actually their responsibility. I don't know if we want to go that far, but I mean, the city can't be responsible for removing all the
Right.
lead on the services.
Yeah, and beyond telling people to run their water in the morning for a couple of minutes before they drink it, which we're already doing.
Right.
Yeah, it's a good idea to let them know there may be a problem, and who knows, regulations down the road may require it at some point. I can see that happening, but for
Yeah.
the city to be responsible for funding that, it would bankrupt the city. That's not a possibility.
Okay,
Let's
understood.
follow up with Dave, yeah.
All right, shift gears, talk about wastewater. And our strategy here is to continue to make needed investments in the city's wastewater collection and treatment infrastructure. And, there's a lot of work being done on this front, or a lot of work having been done already at the water pollution control plant. And so we're obviously going to advocate for and recommend that those improvements continue. Particularly, as I understand it, ongoing improvements for tertiary treatment, which is the highest level treatment of water. To address, we recommend addressing inflow and infiltration issues across the wastewater collection system, and basically groundwater getting into sewer lines, and you end up treating water you otherwise wouldn't have to treat if you could have kept it out of the system. So that's an ongoing issue for most communities, and there's a need to continue to address those, even though, as I understand it in Danbury, that's not a huge component of your flow. To continue plans to develop a solar voltaic installation adjacent to the Danbury Water Pollution Control Plant. Admittedly, I don't know currently where this stands. This was a project that was announced last fall. And it seems like a project that makes a lot of sense, because we're really talking about offsetting, if not replacing, their energy usage with a solar field. In order to do that, that would be located on the old landfill. So we'll want to see where that project stands, so we get the language right on it. And then I don't know how many of you are aware, but the city has a fantastic program or technology that they're employing, and that's called fog separation, which is fats, oils, and grease. And that is to collect them straight at all that stuff at the generators, mostly restaurants, instead of putting them into the pipes, and turn that separate that product and turn it into biodiesel that could be used to power the city's diesel powered trucks and equipment. So that's pretty exciting, and we want to fully support that. Anything we're missing here? Okay, and our last strategy is to proactively work towards obtaining and securing funding through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the 2J or 2IJA. I don't even know how the acronym is said or used, as a means of financing needed improvements to city facilities and infrastructure. And that includes working across city departments to identify projects that would be eligible under the Jobs Act. And Senator Murphy's office released a really informative, I would hesitate to say brochure, because it's about 20 pages, but report on all of the grant programs and funding streams available through the Act that Connecticut communities may be eligible for. And so once you identify projects, obviously to work across city departments with WestCog and state agencies to prepare grant applications and funding requests through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. There's a lot of federal money out there right now. Danbury needs, it's hopefully well positioned to bring some of it home.
Your lips to God's ear, Francisco.
You got that right.
We're doing our work here. That this is an important part of it. All right, anything else on city services and facilities that we should be addressing? Okay. All right, well, let's shift gears and talk about cultural resources. And this is our the last topic area of our plan, last but not least, as they say. And here's our goal. It's fairly succinct, but we invite you to open it up and add to it as you see fit. And the goal is to protect, promote, and continue to act as a steward for Danbury's cultural resources.
Okay, I'll hop in here. I think that we should promote two of our most famous musicians, Ives and Marian Anderson. I think that should be included in here. They're a tremendous intellectual property, if you will, just to make this completely mercenary asset of Danbury. I think we need to lean on that as much as possible.
All right.
I think that we could become the Tanglewood of Connecticut or Western Connecticut. And that's a possibility.
Paul, let me ask you this. How do you see promoting them? How do we channel their histories, their presence into a productive and active cultural resource?
Yeah, I mean, you could do little things like have an award, an annual award. That would be a small thing, a low cost of $500, $1,500 first prize for the greatest musician in high school. Things like that. You could have a Marian Anderson Day. It could be tied into her famous concert at the Lincoln Memorial. You could have a Charles Ives Day. You could tie it in with Insurance Day. He's an insurance guy as well as a fabulously inventive musician. Things like that. Those are all small, low cost. They wind up in the paper, or if whatever the equivalent of the newspaper is going to be in 10 or 15 years. Website, Facebook, or some as yet invented, electronic media thing. Things like that. Simple things. As well as having the Marian Anderson House and making sure that that's sustained and promoted and maintained in a Charles Ives concert for the Charles Ives Performing Arts Center, which we have, and we're in the process of discussing how that's going to be managed. We had an authority; it's been disbanded. We'll probably put something else together, but things like that. They're all most of those are relatively high impact, low cost, but we're really not at the moment doing much of that. So just doing even some of it would be a big improvement.
Oh, I'd like to weigh in.
Yeah, go for it.
Surprisingly, I'm sure to everybody.
And I do think we have some strategies that are great placeholders for some of these ideas, but go ahead, let it flow.
So protect, promote, fund, and continue to act as stewards for Danbury's cultural resources. So all of the programs that Paul mentioned, fantastic. Love to have them, would be phenomenal for the city. You're talking about localized tourism and regionalized tourism and national tourism, but none of that works unless we protect the buildings that continuously tie us to that history, that legacy. So the care and feeding of those historic structures, Marian Anderson's personal studio, Charles Ives' birthplace, we have to care for them in perpetuity if we want to build out the programs that will in perpetuity continue to bring economic prosperity to the area surrounding both of those structures. So all of that wouldn't fit into the cultural resource goal statement. But to Paul's point, unless we take care of those structures, we don't have any of that other than a memory of what was. And I'd love to see what more you have and how we could possibly bulk out the first page. I think to your point, there's probably a lot more that we should be going through before we can go back.
Yeah, we could
it out.
come back to it once you've had the benefit of seeing some of the strategies that we're putting in front of you.
Yeah, Bridget's spot on. I mean, all of that and more. We have to do this because I think there's some study, it pays for every dollar we spend, we get 7 back or something. So again, me being completely mercenary with the taxpayers' money, this is an investment that pays dividends as well as a cultural enhancement for the city.
All right. Okay, the strategies we're going to put in front of you, right? We've arrived at these ideas through the same process I outlined before. So we've done a lot of work in getting here today. The first strategy, and that is to promote and enhance the viability of historic and architectural resources for their continued use or for new uses. And in order to do that, we should first develop an inventory and assessment of all city-owned historic properties and cultural resources. Encourage maintenance of architectural integrity of historic and architecturally significant sites, buildings, and structures when adapted for reuse, whether it be commercial, industrial, residential. And to pursue financial incentives for preservation, including state and federal grants, tax incentive programs, preservation of facades, assessment deferrals, and transfer development rights.
Can I make a comment?
Go for it.
All right. So in number 1, develop an inventory and assessment of all city-owned historic properties and cultural resources in tandem with the city building infrastructure assessment that you mentioned earlier under city services and facilities. Since the city is already going to be engaging in that, we probably shouldn't do 2. If we could do them in tandem, it would work better.
Right. Okay. All right. What else?
We have, I remember starting it with Mayor Boughton 10 years ago. I put my mom on it originally, an architectural review board. It had no teeth. I'm not even sure it ever met, but reestablishing that and giving it a charter and a mission statement, I think would be important. I hear a lot that we've lost a lot of our, from people coming back to Danbury, that we've lost a lot of our historic, that we haven't paid as much attention or maintained them as well, or allowed them to be redeveloped, torn down, whatever. A lot of our architectural significant history in the city, because we just haven't paid that much attention to it. I think, again, that's another large part of our intellectual capital. I'm not talking about the museum buildings. That's a wholly separate issue. I'm just talking about some of these kind of run-of-the-mill that have apparently, like Worcester Cemetery, things like that. They're all sort of tucked away all over the place, but some of them are actually very important. And once they're gone, the first church comes to mind. Once it's gone, it's never going to come back.
So other towns seem to successfully navigate that through a historic properties commission, which we don't have. So possibly investigating the creation of a historic properties commission or like organization to help develop and encourage maintenance of the architectural integrity of historic and architecturally insignificant sites, yada, yada, yada. That might be something that eventually could have teeth or could have more purpose. So if the city creates a historic properties commission, it can be imbued by the city council with teeth over the years. We can take a look at what historic properties commissions work well in the surrounding towns, what don't, and continue to have that discussion. It can be a viably a viable organization that starts from this, but that we can add on to over the next 10 years.
Yeah, and baby steps, because we don't really have any experience in dealing with this. So we'd have to
Right.
sort of, feel our way in the dark for a while. But yeah, it would be, I think, very important, and we need to get started on
I've got
that.
a-
And more carrot than stick. We don't want to scare the owners,
Do you think that
I-
the potential of the future academy would fall somewhere into here, not being so much of a historical resource, but something that is a resource of a 21st century type resource?
I'm sorry, Richard, repeat that?
I was just saying, would the new proposed academy that we're looking to build, if the referendum passes, would that be something that would be included in a cultural resource?
Well, to your point, I think every city school is a cultural resource. We have stages, theater, we have the ability to create production, to do programmatic things at almost every city school. So,
This one I
yeah, no, I'm
building
agreeing.
on the thought of, from a tourism point of view,
Mhm.
if successful and built, could bring in some tourism dollars for people visiting us and wanting to see how the academy operates and, how it differs from a different high school. But just a thought, because when it was presented to us 2 or 3 years ago, they were saying that I guess it was done after Nashville, they had estimated at that time that the academy down there brought in about $8 million since inception in tourism for different people visiting the city, looking at it, things like that. So that's the only reason I throw it out.
So maybe a statement saying leveraging all city assets as cultural resources and the unique ways in which we might be viewing them in the future should be discussed, and maybe we talk about it on a yearly basis. So it's a really good point, because we don't leverage all of our city infrastructure in any unique ways other than, the standard ways we've come to look at them.
Yeah, and not to think of it solely as something that's historical,
Right.
but it's also included in the current day.
Right, it's a cultural
current day
resource.
stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and getting somebody on board who's very broad-minded about that, because previous to Richard bringing this up, it's the last thing I would have thought of. So, it's probably true that we have these things all over the city that just are not, they're not recognized by me. They're probably not recognized by a lot of people.
So
But
then
but
I'll posit.
they're genuine,
So, along with the creation of a historic, properties commission, how about a cultural resources review commission that meets every 2 years?
Well, let's advance a little more, because we've got
Okay.
some ideas that tie
You
into
already hit
that.
that?
I don't know if it's exactly what you had in mind, but we're going to be delving into that.
Synchronicity.
Okay. Well, we've been listening, right? You've been talking and telling us, and some of it is landing. Okay. Let's move on then. The next strategy is to restore and repurpose city-owned historic properties, of which there are a number that are dormant or underutilized. And in order to do that, to continue to pursue grant funding for the restoration of those properties, and consider the sale or transfer of city-owned historic properties if private ownership provides an opportunity for reuse and preservation of the property. Okay. All right, next. Provide continued support for the protection of historic resources in Danbury. That starts with promoting public awareness and appreciation of local historic resources, maintaining an updated historic resource inventory, noting ownership, current use, condition, ensuring publicly owned properties, sites, artifacts, structures, buildings of historical or architectural significance are protected and preserved, continuing care and maintenance of the city's historic cemeteries, and continue Danbury Public School programming that engages students with local cultural institutions such as the Danbury Museum and Historical Society.
How are you envisioning the maintaining an updated historic resources inventory?
Well, I think the first question I would have would be, how often does that need to be done? What is the current status of the inventory the city has? I know we have a list of buildings and some dates and a vague idea of status and condition.
So the historic resources inventory, at least at my place, Sharon, maybe it's a little different when it's at yours, is like in about 14 binders, about 2-inch binders. It is
Right.
significantly large. And although we've engaged with interns over the years to do
Yeah.
one street here, one street there, that it is a massive, although useful undertaking, would maybe need funding on a, every 5-year or every 10-year basis to hire an outside group to come in and do that. It's a tremendous amount of work. It's worthwhile, but it's the full historic resources inventory for the city of Danbury is massive, and was last updated in the 1980s.
Yeah, which was the basis, I think, of the historic district nomination from, so 87, I would say. Yeah.
Bridget, it's been a while since the 1980s. So is
has.
there work that really needs to be done in this area?
Oh yeah, I can tell you right now that I could put somebody on this full time, doing it 2 years, 40 hours a week.
Okay.
It's using the ones that have already been added in, but we could always be expanding it too. So once you've updated the historic resource inventory, then there's the expansion. So since 1987, buildings that wouldn't have been considered part of the initial historic resources inventory have now aged into the historic resources inventory, or potentially into the historic resources inventory. So, doing it is worthwhile. I know, Sharon, I'm sure that you and Jen check or use the historic resources inventory on a regular basis. We do here. We hold the library's copies, so the library, sends people here instead of having the resource there. But it's something that people use, and updating it would be useful to the community. It's just there's a real cost to doing so. And it's really labor.
And some of those buildings are gone. I mean, that's the flip side, of, have
right.
aged in, and some have been demolished for one reason.
Right.
or another.
Bridget, are you aware of outside funding to assist communities with doing that type of work?
So, we could check with COA. There's not a lot of money for that. And it's what is up there is one-on-one match. So, for the museum, that's generally hard to pull together. Yeah. So that would be maybe a cooperative effort between Sharon's office and the museum to go for one-on-one matching money from COA.
What about leveraging some students in architecture or something like that?
We have done that. We've had interns. Not every intern wants to do this project. So I have floating internship projects. I don't make everyone. Generally, when we do an internship here, and I do them all the time, we do projects that really fit what the kids are interested in, so that they stay engaged. This is definitely possible, but it takes a while. I mean, there's building out the pages. It's using several different resources, including visiting the sites. It's not impossible to do through volunteerism, but it's going to take a very long time.
Yeah. I was also thinking of even outside of the community, like a Yale or a School of Architecture or something like that, not just a course as a gen ed course for someone, but real secondary and master's degrees, things like that. So who knows? I mean, we just need to be creative if we're going to do it. So that
if we're going to do it, I know, I just don't want us to be put in a position of this comes out and then we have to do it, but we don't have the funding or the staff to do it.
We could say, yeah, let's work on the wording, I guess, Francisco.
Okay. Anything else on this list? Okay, let's talk about support for the arts, and got a number of ideas about that. And that starts with to consider establishing a division of cultural affairs within the Department of Planning and Zoning or Office of Business Advocacy that would act as the city's liaison to the arts community, coordinate arts and culture programs and activities for the city, and pursue grant funding for arts and culture programs.
Yeah, I would just say we listen, and I re-listened to the focus group with you and Lisa and everybody else, Bridget, about there's a lot of different organizations involved, and one place to house somebody kind of at the city level. I'm not sure where it belongs, but I mean, many other cities around the country have divisions, have departments, have people.
Yeah, I agree. I think Danbury is about 10 years past when we should have had somebody doing that. So,
Right.
I'm all for it. I don't know if Cultural Commission gets folded into that as well.
Yeah, right.
Or we're not establishing a new affairs. We're expanding Cultural Commission and moving them from their current location into your office so that they can be, central to everything.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe that some kind of structure so that we're.
Yeah.
Some of those also are paneled out of mayor's offices, like film commissions and things like that. I'm not sure where we would put it, but yeah, certainly we need it.
Mm-hmm.
Agreeing that we need it is probably a harder
Right.
lift than figuring out where to put it.
Yeah.
Getting this past the council and getting it funded will be more difficult than figuring out where it's going to get placed.
It's more of as well a recognition of arts and culture and how important that is in our community, and it plays in who we were and who we are and who we will be, and that we should, as a city, have some kind of city other than, with all due respect, volunteers. There should be somebody kind of coordinating public art, and you'll see some things down here too.
Certainly,
This
and for a lot of
leverages-
reasons, right? Including attracting businesses to Danbury, which
Right.
is if we want to grow the non-residential aspect of our grand list, by bringing companies to Danbury, we have to offer them more than just 15,000 square feet in a commercial district. They need more than that.
Right.
Well, this leverages the economic viability of arts and culture, and
Right.
putting it at City Hall makes an awful lot of sense.
It
And
does.
tying it to the Office of Business Advocacy is critical to your point as well, Paul. So I think Paul is 100% right. That's we can all agree on it, and then what it looks like down the road.
Well, let's get it. Let's
get
get
some
the
thinking
idea
behind it,
right.
right?
Let's get it seeded and then
Right.
hopefully funded, and then figure out where we're going to put it. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
The next item would be to consider establishing an arts and culture district in downtown Danbury that provides incentives for art studios, resident artists, and that district could be managed or with oversight from Division of Cultural Affairs if established.
Yay.
Love that idea.
Good.
And
Next
the one that
is-
comes after it.
Okay. Next is develop a public art policy and master plan for the city with an emphasis on the downtown.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
As potentially as part of that master plan, or even independent of it, would be to consider establishing a percent for art program that would require large developments to provide public art or contribute to funds in lieu of to support public art.
100%. Cities smaller than us are doing this. Danbury is a little bit behind the curve. So this catches us up with modern public policy regarding public art. And it makes it financially accessible for the city to do this kind of work or promote this kind of work for our local artists.
Good. conduct public art competitions and issue open calls to artists and curators for project ideas. And this is all the more easier to do if you have a policy and a master plan for public art, and you know how you want to administer it, activate it, and where the projects need to be located, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it expands on and even enhances the push to do something with Main Street, which seems to be limited to more bars and more restaurants. But this could be something that people who aren't particularly interested in getting hammered on a Friday night could still use to come down to Main Street if you wanted to do it there, and bring people in on weekends, like you might see in other communities, as Bridget mentioned, even much smaller than Danbury, that seem to be doing this successfully.
Okay. Next is to allow and create a permit for temporary public art.
We kind of do that.
Yeah, through what kind of permitting process?
Well, for
Someone
instance,
wants to do like an installation.
well,
Right.
for instance, City Center is working with one of the property owners to do this mural of a mosaic mural, I guess Perry would describe it. And so we kind of said, just, talk to Sean, he'll issue, he just needs to be aware of it, if any building, issues, and just deal with it in a simple matter so that we're aware of it, but there's no formal permit process that's established. We just want to know what's going up on buildings in case, they break through a building, something hits something on the inside of the building or something like that. So just so we're aware of it, but we didn't make them pull any big permit for anything. We just wanted to know, because it was something that's being affixed to a permitted structure. So, and it's art, and there's no messaging.
Yeah.
It's just mosaic tiles and stuff like that.
I think the idea here is that, you had to have someone go talk to someone. They had to figure out, well, do we allow this, and how do we allow it, and by what means? Okay, you don't really need a permit. Go ahead. I think the idea here is to make it as simple as possible. Oh, we have permit for that. Come on in, and just what you need to tell us. These are the information requirements. This is what you're allowed to do. This is what you're not allowed to do. And if you want to do something outside the bounds of this, then these are the other things you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And just to have a process that almost invites people into it rather than requires them to go knocking on doors. And does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just remember, we're talking about. I'm assuming we're talking about public property here, and that can be an absolute lightning rod for. Well, I'll just leave it at that. So key care would have to be taken in terms of the permitting process and what's allowable and what's not. So
yeah, but Paul, it could also be private property.
Yeah, it could be, and Sharon's office would come into that. Some of these, if you had a Calder type person coming in with a large stay-bill, we'd have to ensure its safety, and it could stand up to winds and things like that. So some of those things would require someone with an engineering background to just sign off on that. But other ones, if it's a banner or a mosaic, would the safety's not an issue, but sometimes it would be, and that would apply. You're right; it would apply to private property. But when it comes to public property, as we're seeing in various places when it comes to Christmas decorations, these things can really start, municipal fires figuratively. So. Not that that's necessarily a bad idea. I've always said that guys like Ives and Marian Anderson were lightning rods in a very good way. A little bit of that is important to the discourse. A little friction's a good thing to have. It gets people to think, but you don't want it to devolve in something that becomes, paralyzing.
Yeah, Paul, I would say a lot of what we're trying to do downtown is activate some of these private properties where not much is going on. So I think by standardizing the process, and like Francisco said, making it inviting, we might get somebody other than City Center trying to do something on their own, which would be great.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. I was just referring to public property, but yeah, private property, go for it, sure.
But to be tied back to a plan, right? So what does downtown, we've talked about this, Perry, you and me and Art, what does down, and Bridget, what do you want to look like downtown? So we're not this hodgepodge of, and then we open our eyes one day and say, oh my gosh, how did we let all of that happen? I mean, I think there has to be, and that process, is kind of developed in the master plan, so.
Well, I'd be curious what Francisco has to say, because I have a hard time imagining how to control an art process like that. I really do.
Well, maybe
No,
all of these new electronic signs after 9 o'clock at night can show paintings by Da Vinci or something.
Right. You mean instead of like, yeah, never mind. No.
I think we need to take a look at what other communities have done with respect to this. I'm sure there's some successful models and programs out there.
Yep.
And finally, to identify areas of the city that would benefit from permanent public art installations where you would like to really direct and invite public art installations. And that, it may be that this specific action is rolled up into developing a master plan and is part of that process. Okay. Couple more items remaining. Next is to develop a marketing campaign for Danbury that features and promotes its cultural resources. And that involves creating and maintaining an arts and culture website that provides a calendar of events, to commission local artists and videographers to produce promotional videos for the city's arts and cultural resources, develop branding and print material as well, and to establish a unified presence on social media to promote the city's cultural resources.
At Bridget could be your megaphone. Yes.
Right. So absolutely necessary. But I'm thinking it falls under the purview of what we talked about in the last slide, the creation of some sort of sub-department or person who is handling all of that promotion and organization of schedule. Like these all sort of tick the box of what we would want that person or persons to do. And, we do very well, create a wonderful website for the city of Danbury. That's like the first stop. So maybe tying the pages together that are currently on the city website and cleaning all of that up. There's an infrastructure in place for some of it. It just hasn't been leveraged. So I'm going to just refer back to the previous slide where we talked about the creation of a department. This is almost, this would all fall underneath that.
Right.
And here I am, I've taken your idea of a commission and I've made it a department in only one sentence. I think the city council members would probably cry if they heard me say that. So, it doesn't have to be as big as a department, but this does seem like it would all fall under the work of 1 or 2 people for 40 hours a week doing all of this. And it's not just leveraging the cultural resources, it's leveraging the cultural resources for the promotion of business within the community. So it's cultural resources tied to economic expansion and development.
So with that being said, earlier in the sessions, Bridget had mentioned something that I thought was an incredible idea, and we needed, somebody said we once had it, and that would be the department or an office of tourism. So if we had something like that, and it encompassed this plus other things, would that make sense, is to put that, these particular functions, as well as some others, under that category or that responsibility?
I think having that one person who is connecting to statewide tourism and leveraging Danbury's tourism initiatives on the statewide level. I can't do it here. The Train Museum does a great job, but they can't do it over there. But having someone who's doing it comprehensively for Danbury, which again falls underneath the promotion of cultural resources, would be really important. It's going to be investing in, unfortunately, anytime soon in recreating the tourism infrastructure that we used to have. So if they're not going to do it, then, you know, to your point, Francisco, we should be doing it.
Okay, good. I think we're agreed then, right?
And I might have wanted to add this on the last slide, but I guess it kind of
Yeah, go
applies
ahead,
here.
Gary.
What better way to celebrate and market our city's vast diversity than through the arts?
Mhm.
So it hits a bunch of our goals and strategies.
Mhm.
Right, got it. Okay. All right, our last strategy is to revive Danbury as a place that is home to events. And revive in two senses. One, I just had the general sense from people that the city seemed like it was a more active, eventful place 10, 20, 30 years ago. And then, of course, over the past 2 years, everything's, you know, been quiet, and we want to bring it back to life. So that we have a few ideas on that, and certainly receptive to your ideas as well. And that is to make the event permitting process as accessible, flexible, and easy as possible. To promote events through a one-stop shop website event calendar. We've made other references to a website or calendar. And this just ties right back into those recommendations. And to continue to partner with local organizations to conduct annual festivals or events. And when we say continue to partner, that is the city proactively being a partner and an organizer with other organizations in hosting and conducting events.
And Perry, as you know, we do, Les is doing a great job. I mean, there were so many events he rattled off the other day, I lost track, but there are things obviously we're doing together, and we just need to continue to do that.
Absolutely.
Not just with city center.
Exactly. I love the idea of promoting a one-stop place where you don't have the Greek festival and the Portuguese festival on the same day. You have somebody promoting, go to this one this weekend, go to this one the next. Coordination, I guess.
And if you have one place where everything's coordinated, it's a lot easier for those different organizations to plan their events so that they can maximize turnout by not scheduling it exact same time as another event that's showing up on that calendar. And here's where I think Paul, your earlier comments about Marian Anderson and Charles Ives and more events and celebration of their significance to Danbury. I think that's where that comes in right here through more events featuring their role.
It does. And I've been involved in events over the last 25 or 30 years that unfortunately had to be suspended, ultimately canceled because the permitting process is too unwieldy. And the expense of meeting the city's requirements was too high. Not only myself, but also other people. One of them happens to be another councilman. Some of that has to do with legal enforcement with the police. So the police should probably be involved with this. It turns out there's a tremendous expense in hiring police officers, and that is basically determined by the chief's office. And they tell you that you need 15 cops and there are X amount and that can kill an event. So some of these things that take place close to main thoroughfares where the police are saying you need a lot of traffic control can't really survive. So there's a lot of parts to this about putting on a show in Danbury, maybe in any community. But Danbury has personally, in my personal knowledge, has lost several very large events because of onerous production requirements on the city side. Having said that, going back to the time when the Housatonic Valley Office of Regional Television, of Regional Tourism was operating, we had a film commission which was so fluid and worked so well that we were there were, some of you may remember this, there were the late 90s, early O's, 2 or 3 ongoing film productions in this town every year. I'm not talking about independent pictures. I'm talking about Universal with their trucks in here. And the city bent over backwards to accommodate them. So it was, with some things, it was really well done, and other things, it was a lot of friction. So yeah, it's something that streamlines that and makes it easily understood, is really welcome.
Yeah. Pleasant Street, I recall, there was something filming.
Correct. There was Wes
Yeah.
Craven
Yeah.
did a picture on Pleasant
Exactly.
Street, and the
Exactly,
trucks
but-
were parked. Right, the trucks were
Everywhere.
parked on Division Street.
Yeah.
While they were doing the Traveling Sisterhood of the Pants or whatever that was at WestCon, and there were a couple of other pictures.
Yeah.
You know, there was a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, but also having some place where things are coordinated will make it easier to, you know, see what's going on around, and you know, and if you can't hold it there, maybe you can hold it here and still hold it, and not
Right.
just say, no, it's,
Right.
you know, I can't do it because they won't let me use Pleasant Street, and instead we're
Right.
saying, why don't you go to Hatters Park or something like that.
I remember we were shooting a commercial in Terrywile, and the airplanes were flying overhead like every 5 minutes. I called Esteban up, and he said, "You want me to close the airport?" I said, "Yeah." So we closed the airport for 45 minutes. We finished the shot, and everybody, I mean, that was one of those things. The producers could not believe I shut the airport down for 45 minutes. And I said, "Hey, that's Danbury." On the other hand, a couple of weeks later, they wouldn't let us do this other thing because we didn't have enough cops. So it was just, it was, you know, it really depended on mood, and it needs to be a little bit more professional than that. But I'll tell you, when a city gets behind a project, wow, watch out. It happens.
Okay,
Yeah, I think these were great, Francisco. And again, you know, we'll send you the PowerPoint. So if, you know, that you think of anything else, or again, once it all gets put together, there may be other things that, you know, we want to add. But I think this was a really good discussion on both these two components of the plan. So thank you. Francisco.
okay, good. So where do we go from here? Well, we'll meet again in June, and we'll come back to you with our pencil sharpened on both cultural resources and city services and facilities, with some final recommendations for strategies and actions on both those topic areas. And we're also going to start work on the future land use map. The future land use map is a required component of the POCD. It's a really important component. It identifies, we will identify areas of the city where we want to focus and concentrate housing, economic development. It provides a foundation for your zoning. It also affords us an opportunity to identify areas where the priority should be environmental protection, conservation, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of work to be done in that area, and we plan on coming to you with our first ideas on that. And we're really going to start putting the document together and sharing with you full sections of this document so you can start to see how it fits together. Once again, looking to have the plan adopted by the end of the year, and we'll provide you plenty of opportunities to review drafts of the plan at various stages. All right, so that's what it looks like on the chart, and there we are, believe it or not, about 75% of the way into our schedule here. And so I discussed our next steps already. That's basically the agenda for our next meeting. And that next meeting is on Tuesday, June 21st at 4 o'clock. And I forget, is it the first or second day of summer? I always forget if it's the 20th or the 21st, but believe it or not, already working our way towards summer.
Yeah, and again, we'll continue on Zoom. It just works better for everybody.
Yeah, please, let's keep doing that.
Yeah.
I'm amazed at how many people are packed in meetings and nobody's wearing a mask. It boggles my mind. It's just like, anyway.
Okay. Thank you, Francisco.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Yep.
Your feedback is very helpful, so thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good meeting.
Yeah,
Yes.
anybody, anything else, anyone, before we adjourn?
I'm good. I
Okay.
thought it was very productive. Thank you, Francisco.
Yeah, thank you, Tim.
Thank you, very
Hey,
good.
Tim, I'm going to follow up with you. Okay, I'll
Okay.
I'll
Absolutely.
send you an email. Thank you.
Look forward to it.
All right,
Okay,
good night,
so
everyone.
6:01, good night. We're going to adjourn.
Okay.
We don't have a quorum, so we're
Night.
going to just adjourn.
Thank you.
Night,
Bye.
thank you.
We'll approve the meeting
Night,
next
everyone.
time, all four of them.
All right, good night.